In Japan, you can buy a newly built house near a major commute corridor for about $250,000. In Canada, the average new detached home now crosses $800,000, and in Toronto or Vancouver, nothing new lists below $1.2 million. The usual explanation is population growth and land scarcity. But the Canadian starter home was not priced out of existence, it was legislated out by a stack of policies almost nobody talks about. Across the developed world, the starter home remains a physical reality. In Japan, these are typically 900-square-foot detached properties built near major transit corridors and sold for around $250,000 United States dollars. In Germany, outside of high-cost hubs like Munich and Frankfurt, the market consistently delivers modest, newly built houses geared specifically toward first-time buyers. These countries prove that high density and growing populations do not automatically destroy affordability. Instead, Canada has become the outlier. In 2023, the national average for a new detached home crossed $800,000. In Toronto and Vancouver, where new detached homes under $1.2 million have completely vanished, the traditional entry point to home ownership has been erased. This gap is not a natural result of geography. While other nations design their systems to build modest housing, Canada's policies have made the creation of a basic starter home a regulatory impossibility. The home itself has become an endangered species, not because of a lack of land, but because it has been legislated out of existence. In the early 1980s, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, called CMHC, defined a starter home through a reliable financial benchmark. Under this logic, a starter home was a basic dwelling that a single-income household earning the national median wage could purchase with a 10% down payment and a 25-year mortgage. This formula mattered because it anchored housing costs directly to local wages and personal savings, rather than parental wealth or inheritance. It meant a normal job was enough to secure a property. But that math broke. Between 2005 and 2012, this traditional model stopped functioning entirely across Canada's major metropolitan markets. In Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and Montreal, the relationship between median wages and entry-level home prices severed, ending decades of predictable housing access. A single median earner, even with a 10% down payment, could no longer qualify for a mortgage on a basic house. By 2012, the starter home as a wage-attainable reality had effectively disappeared from major Canadian cities. This shift did not happen by accident, nor was it the natural result of a growing population. Instead, a series of deliberate municipal, provincial, and federal policy decisions began quietly moving in the same direction, dismantling the old ladder into home ownership step by step. Before a single shovel hits the dirt, a new home accumulates massive municipal costs. Under Ontario's Development Charges Act of 1997, municipal governments hold the authority to levy upfront fees on new developments. These charges fund the essential infrastructure required for growth, things like roads, water lines, sewers, transit, and public parks. In 1990, the development charge on a typical new home in the Greater Toronto Area sat at roughly $5,000. By 2022, that municipal fee had skyrocketed, ranging from $150,000 to $200,000 per unit. Municipalities set these rates, but developers do not absorb them. Instead, builders pass every dollar directly to the buyer in the final sale price. When a fixed municipal fee increases by several thousand%, it completely alters what makes financial sense to construct. A home builder cannot build a modest, entry-level house when the regulatory tax alone exceeds the entire construction budget of a generation ago. The rising cost of municipal entry fees simply made it impossible to build. But even if a builder could afford those municipal fees, they ran into a far more absolute barrier: the law. For decades, Canadian city planning systems made it illegal to build anything other than a single detached house on the vast majority of urban land. Roughly 70% of residential land in Toronto and 65% in Vancouver was locked under exclusive single-family zoning. This planning choice outlawed the most affordable starter-scale housing forms like duplexes, triplexes, and row houses. These options were simply forbidden by law. Only recently have municipal councils begun to backtrack. In 2023, Toronto passed Bylaw 958/2023 in a 13-4 vote, legalizing fourplexes citywide. Vancouver followed in 2024, passing Bylaw 194/2024 in an 8-3 vote to permit multiplexes. But these milestones are late, reactive reversals. They come after decades of zoning policies that systematically ensured the most attainable rungs on the housing ladder could not legally be built. Provincial regulations strictly dictated where builders could place a shovel. In 2005, Ontario established the Green Belt, protecting roughly 800,000 hectares of land around the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Similar growth boundaries capped outward expansion across Canada, from British Columbia's Agricultural Land Reserve to metropolitan planning boards in Edmonton and Calgary. Preserving agricultural land was an intentional ecological choice, but it had a predictable impact on land values. By restricting outward growth without simultaneously legalizing density inside the boundaries, policymakers created scarcity. Builders could not expand outward, and municipal zoning still outlawed multiplexes inward. This forced the price of remaining buildable land to skyrocket. The housing market reacted to regulatory rules rather than physical geography, turning basic dirt into a luxury asset. Even if a home could be built, a buyer still had to finance it. Between 2008 and 2016, the federal government rolled out 6 separate rounds of mortgage insurance tightening, transforming the path to home ownership into an absolute qualification wall. The maximum amortization period was slashed from 40 years down to 25, while minimum down payments rose and maximum insured purchase prices were capped. These changes aimed to protect the financial system from lending risks, but each round directly chipped away at entry-level buying power. The financial math shifted dramatically against young families. In 2005, a Toronto household needed an income of about $55,000 to qualify for a median detached home. By 2023, that required income skyrocketed to over $180,000. Meanwhile, the actual median household income only rose to about $95,000. These rules did nothing to solve the underlying supply shortage. Instead, they ensured that a modest home became completely unfinanceable on a normal wage. The federal gatekeeper closed the door, turning would-be buyers into permanent renters before they could even make an offer. When wages and personal savings can no longer bridge the gap, the housing market splits along a new fault line of family wealth. Home ownership has shifted from a milestone earned through wages to one decided by inheritance. In 2024, a Royal LePage survey found that 31% of Canadian first-time buyers received financial help from their parents, with the average gift or loan reaching $115,000. This is a down payment on inequality, separating those with family assets from those without. The structural barrier is clear in the numbers. Statistics Canada data shows that home ownership among adults aged 25 to 34 plummeted from 49% in 2011 to 36% in 2021. The ladder is gone. Today, Canada's housing market rewards inheritance over hard work. By outlawing the starter home, we legislated a permanent class divide. If wages can no longer buy security, what kind of country are we actually building? Let me know your thoughts below.